Mr. Henze, was there any encouragement from Washington or from European capitals? I'm not saying that, come on, do something to the military, but any kind of a signal, a kind of a encouragement, look, step in and do something, stop this. That kind of...
I can recall nothing. Of course, anybody who knows anything about Turkey knows that the Turkish military feel that they have and long have had a special role in Turkey and that they take a special responsibility for the country. So obviously, people were watching what the military said, what the military were doing, statements by military leaders. But I don't recall that anybody in Washington felt that we had to tell the military what to do. And fortunately, nobody felt that we had to tell the military not to do anything. Now, there's a long record in the American government going way back to the Kennedy administration, but the Carter administration was initially very much inclined in this direction to try to keep military groups from taking power or exerting influence in their countries. But in the case of Turkey, I don't think this was very operative. This was a possible danger. Turkey was also characterized during this period in very negative terms by the Greek lobby, by the Armenian lobby, and by others who wished to detract from Turkish performance. I can recall Greek representatives coming to the National Security Council and telling us we should give up on Turkey. Turkey's hopeless. We should not be supporting Turkey at all. Now, these positions were too negative and too naive for anybody to take them seriously. Nobody in Washington was inclined to dismiss Turkey. Turkey was obviously too important, and after the fall of Iran, Turkey was clearly a first priority concern.
When did you have the first indication that the military they were coming?
Well, I think there were statements. Again, I'd have to go back and check my notes in the record, but I think at different times General Evren and other military leaders gave what anybody with any understanding of politics understood as warnings that politicians should pull themselves together and try to do something. From an economic point of view, once Turgut Özal became a leading figure, things began to improve. But from the point of view of public security, terrorism became worse and worse. It was as if the terrorists wanted to do everything possible to keep the economic program from succeeding. There were disruptions, there were demonstrations, there were actions against industries. The labor organizations, particularly DISK, was encouraged to foment difficulty among workers. There were areas of Ankara and Istanbul that were called liberated areas. I remember once in Ankara, when I visited during that time, taking an afternoon walk around the city and suddenly finding myself in the middle of one of these liberated areas. And some rather polite local people came and took me by the arm and led me to the edge and led me out, saying I really should not be there. Now, nothing worse than that happened. I'm not sure they knew who I was, but I was obviously a foreigner who had wandered into their area.
At one point you had the feeling, people in Washington had the feeling that with Ecevit and Demirel it's not going to work.
Well, it wasn't going to work in the sense that they couldn't get together and that neither one had the strength to bring together an effective coalition. I think in Washington, particularly during the year 1980, the prevailing view, it would be interesting to go back and read some of the intelligence estimates of that time, and I suppose they're available now, but the prevailing view was probably that the politicians in Turkey could not really bring it together. However, Turgut Özal's reputation rose very, very rapidly after the 24th of January reforms. Now, the feeling also was that probably there would be military intervention, but there was no feeling that the United States had to encourage the military to decide to do it. There was a great deal of respect for the Turkish military. There was never the slightest hint of corruption or wrong dealing on the part of anybody in the Turkish military.
So in a way, Washington didn't need to encourage the military. But did Washington send a signal saying, come on, don't do it?
Washington definitely did not, and thank heaven. There probably were people at some level in the administration who would like to have done that. There may have been some congressmen who would like to have done that. But there was never any official action whatsoever designed to discourage the generals from taking action. Now, in the summer of 1980, in August, and I forget the date, it was probably about the middle of the month, General Shahin Kaya came suddenly. And General Shahin Kaya made the rounds of Washington, talked to a great many people. I remember spending an evening at the house of the chief of the general staff. Good heavens, his name escapes me at the moment. But it was a very nice social evening with a lot of talk about Turkey and Turkish customs and the beauties of Turkey and Turkish history, but with almost no talk about current politics. And I remember then talking to Ambassador Elikdağ the next day and saying, you know, what was this all about? Why did General Shahin Kaya come? Ambassador Elikdağ said, well, he came in order to get an impression of attitudes toward Turkey and concern about Turkey in Washington. Now, actually, he came for another purpose. Ambassador Elikdağ admitted to me after the general stepped in on the morning of the 12th of September. He said General Shahin Kaya came to tell me that the generals were going to move. But we both decided that there was no need to tell the Americans because we did not want to confront you with a problem. We didn't want to have to put you in a situation where you should say, no, don't do it, or make a public statement to that effect. And from that point of view, it went off exactly as the Turkish generals wanted it to go.
When did you hear, first, did the CIA or Pentagon heard about the coup before?
I don't think so. I heard about the coup in a call from the National Security Council the evening it occurred, but the evening was already morning in Turkey. And President Carter, as I recall, was at the Kennedy Center, and I put in a call immediately that a messenger should go to tell him. But he didn't leave. There was no reason to leave. It was basically a very positive development. And the next day, the feeling in Washington was a sense of relief that the generals had taken over, and it was quite clear that they had taken over peacefully, effectively, and that they were going about the business of rounding up terrorists and doing an effective job of it.
What was your message to President Carter?
I can't remember exactly what I said, but I can remember that the man who called me from the duty desk in the National Security Council said something to the effect, well, the boys in Ankara did it, meaning that the generals had moved. And that was really all there was to the story. Now, of course, the next day we were keenly interested in how it had all worked out, but it had all worked out very smoothly. It was obviously very carefully planned.